We're going to move now to our next speaker, who's come down from Washington, Alisa Simmons, the field representative for Global Trade Watch. Alisa initially came and met in this meeting hall back in January, invited here, or just brought here by Dominique Alasso. And Denise Diaz also played a role in bringing her into the hall, which is where I first heard about the TPP and the movement against it. She's been instrumental around the country in helping activists to form organizations and to take action against the TPP. Please give me a warm round of applause.
Thank you for the warm introduction, and thank you all so much for having me. I will start by saying that you probably have some indication of how special you are. But any group of people that want to talk about trade at 8:30, 9 o'clock are very, very special. And for me, you're the best day that can happen on Friday. So thank you so much. It's great to be here with you. When Jim and Mary Slater and I were talking last night, we were asking me kind of where I wanted to be on the agenda. I said, well, I'm flanked by all of these specialists. Usually I'm the one who's having to give the 60-minute or the 90-minute presentation on the TPP. I said, well, you've got all these specialists in the room. Let's have them talk, and I'll fill in what wasn't, kind of talked about. So I went through all of the bios, and I said, okay, I can expect what folks are going to talk about. So let me be prepared to talk about financial regulations and Glass-Steagall. Already kind of talked about. Let me be prepared to talk about food safety. Already kind of talked about. And the internet. I also want to talk about public health. So you all have had some of that throughout the entire evening. I'm going to plug in the holes a little bit, and I think we're at the point where and I also want to talk a little bit more explicitly about fast track, because we've all talked about how bad the TPP is. Now let's kind of flip the discussion and talk about how we're going to stop it. And fast track is a way to do that, so I want to spend a little bit of time talking about that. So financial regulations. Brother just talked about how Wall Street is behind the TPP. Absolutely, that's it. So when it comes to financial regulations, the Trans-Pacific Partnership is the way for corporations to get what they couldn't get through Congress. So it's a backdoor mechanism for them to deregulate all of the regulation that we worked so hard for. So folks like Senator Elizabeth Warren, members like Alan Grayson, they fight all the time. And when corporations lose, they say, okay, we're going to turn around and use these trade deals now to pass through what we want. I mean, look at the TPP, and we have not had access to the text, right? I think someone or many people talk about the fact that the text that we have seen is because they've been leaked. At Public Citizen, in Global Trade Watch, we, along with Alana from the Sierra Club, work very closely with her. She's a great ally. Along with Alana, we travel all over I don't travel, but my other colleagues travel all over the world to these negotiations. The director, Lori, has been doing this for about 25 years, and so she has relationships built up with chief negotiators. So we have been able to see a little more, but of course we can't talk about it. What we do know is that the TPP has 29 chapters. Of those 29 chapters, only 5 of them deal with regular trade matters. So you have 24 chapters that have nothing to do with traditional trade. When you think about international trade or free trade agreements, what are the first things that pop into your head? Mary Slater. Tariffs, right? Tariffs. Imports, exports, kind of boring stuff. How it functions, okay, all right, jobs, yay. The TPP is not dealing with those things. A small part of the Trans-Pacific Partnership actually deals with those things. So this is going to be a significant shift, and Jim alluded to this in his presentation. This is the shift, the real shift, that gives corporations the opportunity to take over government, to take over our government. That's what we're really talking about here. I've given hundreds of presentations, and it always gets to a point in the night where people think I'm a crazy conspiracy theorist. It kind of always happens. But when we look at the trends, and we we look at the data that is available, it's really, really clear what these corporations are doing. Like Margie said, there are over 600 corporate advisors that have access to the text. And not only do they have access to the text, they're able to go in, log into their computers, give comments on what they want changed. So they're developing this trade agreement. I want to, is there a question? No, okay.
Yeah, I keep wondering, how did they pitch this to all these countries? What's in it for the countries to agree to this?
That's a really, really good question. And the brother says money.
Money. They know that if they get their stuff over here, we'll buy it. We're crazy. We don't buy America. We buy everything else except America.
Yeah, so there's two answers. Money is the obvious answer, money for corporations, and then money to countries that are kind of less developed. Now you think about the countries that are involved, right? The United States already has bilateral free trade agreements with many of the countries involved. Right. So the additions are just about kind of this global takeover. Like why are we in a free trade agreement with Iran? Like what kind of sense does that make, right? Access to resources. Singapore. Vietnam. Right? The United States doesn't need that. The corporations need that and want that. What do you got, Jerry?
Well, I think the official excuse is that this is a way to limit China.
Yes, except that China has already shown interest in joining the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So one thing that wasn't mentioned about the TPP is that this very well may be, well, they just started, I'm sure you all know, they just started TAFTA, the Transatlantic Free Trade Agreement, which will be between the US and the EU. But the Trans-Pacific Partnership is being considered a docking agreement. And what that means is that this might be, well, except for Europe, this might be the last free trade agreement that the United States ever has to negotiate. As long as any other country agrees to the terms of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, even after it's negotiated, if it gets passed, any country can join. Any country can join, and China has already shown interest that it wants to be a part of the TPP. So that's kind of where we are with that. So I want to just talk about food safety a little bit, because this gets really scary, and there's a movement in this country around food safety that is so uplifting and exciting. When I go out and talk about trade, a lot of the anti-Monsanto activists are always there. A lot of people who are into growing their own food always show up, and that is so heartwarming, and it gives me hope. Because what they're trying to do around food safety is really, really dangerous. Now, the Trans-Pacific Partnership would require us to import meat and poultry that don't even meet U.S. safety standards. Our standards aren't that high. Okay? Our standards aren't that high. But under the Trans-Pacific Partnership, we would be required to import meat and poultry that don't even meet our standards. And the reason that we've been able to do that is because our standards would be considered trade barriers. So anything that would infringe on a corporation's right to profit is considered a trade barrier. So if I go to a store and I have the option of buying a steak that came from Virginia, or a steak that came from Mexico, I live in DC. It makes sense to me to get something that's closer to home that hasn't been shipped, across the country. Labeling is an issue because Mexico and Canada, other countries are saying, hey, that if an American consumer will buy something from Virginia and not from Mexico, that's unfair to us. That's prohibiting our profits. So we want to get rid of labeling.
Not to mention the conditions that the workers are experiencing that are in those poultry plants and those beef plants in other countries. In spite of the conditions that they're subjected to in this country, the conditions in other countries, there's going to be less protections, health and safety protections, and other kind of protections for those workers.
You're absolutely right. I used to work, I'm not remembering the year, but I used to work for the United Food Commercial Workers, and one of my plants was the Foster Farms chicken plant in Kelso, Washington. I was vegan for 7 years after that. After I went and saw. the conditions that those workers were working in and the condition of, the food that we have to eat. So you're absolutely right about that. So I talked about labeling, and additives have the same thing. Specific to seafood, right now the Food and Drug Administration, right now they inspect less than 1% of seafood. So all the seafood that we consume, less than 1% of it is inspected for health and safety reasons. So Singapore and Vietnam, specifically, countries that are in the Trans-Pacific Partnership, they are known for having some of the worst seafood in the world. So what the Trans-Pacific Partnership would do is flood an already under-regulated market with more bad food, bad seafood. How, think about, how do we live? How do we eat? How do we, provide food for ourselves when these are the options that we have? This is what the Trans-Pacific Partnership would do specific to food safety. I want to talk about internet freedom for a little bit. Remember SOPA, Stop Online Piracy Act, 2011? Folks rose up, stopped it from going through Congress. Even Google was behind it. It was horrible. What we're calling the son of SOPA is back in the Trans-Pacific Partnership. They couldn't ram it through Congress, and so now they're putting it through this free trade agreement. What business does internet freedom have in a free trade agreement? Absolutely none. Absolutely none. So under what we know so far, internet service providers could be required to police user activity. Required to police user activity. Each and every one of us. They could take down our content and cut people off from the internet for accessing common user-generated content. Mandatory fines would be imposed for individuals' non-commercial copies of copyrighted material. So for example, if I create a video on YouTube and I take something from something that was already produced and that's copyrighted and put it in there, it could be 2 seconds, it could be 5 seconds. I could be fined for it. There could be mandatory fines. As an individual, I'm not showing this to a group of people. I'm not making a big movie, but just as an individual, I would be fined the same way as a company that was using it for commercial use. Public health. I think someone talked a little bit about access to medicines. The Trans-Pacific Partnership would provide large pharmaceutical firms new rights and powers, because they don't have enough, right? New rights and powers to increase medicine prices and limit consumers' access to cheaper generic drugs. Some provisions in the Trans-Pacific Partnership would extend patents for up to 20 more years. A lot of the extensions are 17 years. So we're 17 to 20 years. So we're talking about having a 40-year patent on a drug. This would include extensions of monopoly and drug patents. But the scary thing is that the Trans-Pacific Partnership would allow monopoly rights over surgical procedures. So not only drugs, but actual surgical procedures. Yeah, no, it's really, really scary. So one company would have a patent over a specific procedure. So,
like a heart procedure.
Yeah, thank you. I've heard those going through personal ones. I'm like, not too personal. So like a heart procedure. Well, only one company would be able to provide that. Another dental procedure, only one company would be able to provide that. So if you go to a hospital and that company has not infiltrated and taken over that hospital, you could not get that procedure. Or if changes needed to be made to the procedure to improve it, the company wouldn't have to make those changes for X amount of years, especially if it prohibited their profit in some way.
Well, that limits doctors as well.
Oh yeah.
That reminds me of famous heart doctor who discovered the procedure for putting stents in hearts and stuff. So does that mean that a company somehow that would be patented or something, or because he discovered it and then some company would buy it. Well, what would stop if another company improved on it, they could put him out of business on the new procedure?
Right. Well, I mean, yes, that would happen now, but that would not happen under the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So that's what it would limit. Yeah, this is dangerous. This is dangerous stuff, Sherry.
Well, normally, because in the textile industry, I used to have to fight patents all the time. You can't patent a procedure the way you can patent a product. You can patent the use of that procedure. And normally, when you patent the use of a procedure, you can charge a royalty to anyone that does the procedure. And that's the way things are done now.
Right.
But the product itself, a procedure is not a product. You know, you didn't invent a new scalpel, all right? You didn't invent a new laser. I mean, what you did was find a way to use existing instruments to do something that nobody else has done before.
Right. So, right. So what I'm saying is that under the Trans-Pacific Partnership, it would not be that way. We're agreeing on that.
Okay.
Yeah, we're agreeing on that. So that's how dangerous this is. And before I think we get into more questions, I just want to go through fast track more explicitly, because this is how we stop the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And after the presentation, I always feel overwhelmed, right? Everyone feels overwhelmed. But we have these 600 corporations, and it's all these countries in the Pacific Rim. What do we do? It's just us. It's like 30 of us tonight and Friday. What do we do? We stop fast track, and we can do it. We've done it before. The brother alluded to that. We stopped it twice. We can do it again. And I can tell you that it's really, really good. But we have to fight. We have to keep the heat on. So under the United States Constitution, Congress writes the laws and sets trade policy. That's under the U.S. Constitution. 1974, a guy named Richard Nixon came up with something to take that authority away from Congress and put it in the hands of the president, put it in the hands of the administration, and that is what fast track is, or a trade promotion authority, which you alluded to earlier, Margie. Candidate Obama, this is what he said when he was running for office. Candidate Obama said he would replace fast track. I will ensure that Congress plays a strong and informed role in our international economic policy and in any future agreements we pursue. Instead, now he's asking Congress for that authority, for that power to pass the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I'm sure you all also remember, and I'm not here to bash on the president. Public Citizen is a not-for-profit. We don't get political. This is not about President Obama and Romney, whatever happened. I'm not advocating for any specific candidate. But that's what he said, and this is what he's doing. I'm sure you all also remember during the primaries, the heated debates around NAFTA. And how he bashed Hillary Clinton and said that he would provide a new trade model, and this was a turnaround for the country. The Trans-Pacific Partnership is an expanded model of NAFTA. It's the same fatal trade policies that we've seen over and over and over again. So this is nothing new. Of the 500 plus U.S. trade agreements enacted since 1974, when Fast Track was hatched, Fast Track was used for 16 of them. We believe that Fast Track is only needed to pass bad trade agreements. Because since 1974, there's been over 500. Congress can do this. They've done it before. You know, folks, I travel around the country talking about this. I talk to state legislators. And a lot of them say, you know what, give Obama the authority. Our Congress is a mess. I can't imagine how we would pass anything with these folks. They could never do this. It's been done before. It's been done hundreds of times with dysfunctional Congresses. Congress can do this again. Fast Track handed, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Before you go a little longer, okay, Congress You said Congress writes the laws and sets the trade policy. How did Nixon get around that? What did he do?
He created Fast Track Trade Promotion Authority and got it passed through Congress. So the president has to ask. The president doesn't automatically have it. He or she has that, or he has to ask. She coming has to ask Congress for that authority. So Congress has to give it up every time.
And what is it called again?
It's called Fast Track or Trade Promotion Authority, TPA.
So it's fast track slang?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, the Fast Track is the original name actually.
oh,
And then it came up with Trade Promotion Authority seemed more official
yeah.
and less slimy.
What normally happens is when you elect a Republican president, Congress rushes to give the president fast track authority. And then when a Democrat's elected, they rush to take it away. Because they usually trust the Republican president on things like environmental, corporations trust the Republican president on things like environmental and labor issues. But I guess this president's been around long enough and they've been doing this deal long enough that if they're pushing for fast track, something's up.
Fast Track hands the executive branch 5 key congressional powers. So I just want to talk about how much power this legislation, Fast Track, actually gives the president. The power to select trade partners, the power to set terms and sign the trade agreements before Congress has a chance to vote on it. So when you get to the point that it's a vote, the president's already signed off on it. This is really just kind of, this is really a rubber stamping mechanism. It's a formality, exactly. It's an up and down vote. Marjorie said earlier, there's no room for debate, there's no room to amend anything. Gives the administrative branch the power to write legislation to change all U.S. laws needed to conform with the trade agreements, skirt congressional review and amendments, and directly submit the legislation for a vote. Power to force votes within 60 to 90 days of submitting the implementing legislation to Congress. And the power to completely override normal voting rules. All amendments on fast track FTAs are banned and debate is limited, including in the Senate, which its entire purpose is to debate these issues and make decisions on them. So that's the huge amount of power that the Congress will hand over to the president if this passes.
Does it basically just make it an executive order then?
Yeah, I mean it's a little different than an executive order, but
I mean, he doesn't need anybody's approval to do an executive order.
well, he still kind of needs. I mean, the difference is that there is a vote.
Yeah.
You know.
What if it's voted down?
Well, that's it will vote. Well,
Or should I wait?
no, you shouldn't wait.
Congress says no
Well, it's a fast track.
to that vote, that final vote, that formality.
It hasn't happened.
What was Congress thinking under Nixon passing this?
Good question.
Yeah, that's a really
Here,
good
do my
question.
job, see ya, I wanna go on vacation.
You know, deals get made. Who knows what happened behind the scenes? Deals get made all the time. I'm not working Congress, but
I can tell you, specifically at that time, the '74, Watergate was percolating at that particular time. The concern, remember when the president went to China? And specifically, they started at that particular time. They didn't want the president in a trade agreement situation that appeared to be weak. Because specifically, if they were overseas and they could make a good deal, the president could actually just do it. But Congress has, as a whole, oftentimes what Congress will do is they'll pass the buck on what they should really be doing. And this is the problem with this. It was something they shouldn't have passed off this way. But they did it. Democratic Congress, Republican president.
It's like sending the CEO to sign the deal.
Because, think about it, even if, you look at your Constitution, it says Congress shall make all law, but yes, specifically, on the budgetary side, they passed it off to the president. So they usually, even in the budget process, they wait for the president to actually submit a budget, but Congress ultimately has the authority on it. Congress can make their own budget anytime, but they legally and statute-wise passed it off to the president so that they can scrutinize the president in the process. This seems to be the same thing. That would just be my interpretation.
That's helpful, thank you. So that's what I have on fact check, and I'd like to switch to a conversation about kind of how we win, and what the strategy is behind that.
There you go.
And, but I would like to do that off camera.
Turn it
So
on.
we could have a real conversation.
Well, let's leave the camera rolling and have our last speaker.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought it was the last speaker. I apologize.
No, I just wanted to move you up because